have two children at Elmfield, one in class 11 and one in class 5. The older child has been here since class 5 and is now entering her final year. Both of them absolutely adore the school. It was a very difficult decision to send them both here because they were in the state system to start with. But in the case of my daughter in particular, she was very much struggling with the state system. She was under an awful lot of stress and felt a lot of pressure, partly because of the hoops that the school had to leap through. I mean, it wasn't entirely their fault. But it reached a point where she couldn't cope anymore and she was literally suffering physical effects of stress. And after one particularly bad weekend, we decided to have a look at alternatives. Came across Elmfield on the website, had a look at it, and from the moment I walked through the gate, I fell in love with the place. It's got such a wonderful atmosphere. The minute you walk through, the children are happy, and that's patently obvious. So we brought her along for a trial, and for the first time ever, on that first day of the trial, my daughter walked out of school with a smile on her face. And that just sold it. I said, come what may, she's starting at this school in September, and that's what we did. And a few years later, my son followed. Unfortunately, personal circumstances meant we couldn't afford to send him here immediately. But he's just started in class 5. Started in class 4, I beg your pardon. So he's done a whole year here now and has taken to the school and the Holsteiner system like a duck to water. Absolutely adores it. As far as the education is concerned here, I would say self-confidence, self-belief, self-esteem are all the main things that come through. Yes, there's all the academic stuff, and if you have a particularly academic child, it's fantastic. They get the results that anybody would wish to get. But it's also the personal points which I think are very important. They learn to communicate. They can communicate with anybody in any situation. And I think it's wonderful that they have the confidence to be able to go out and do that. My daughter, for example, sings in Stream of Sound, which is based at the school. And one of the things that strikes me most is when we go to concerts where the choir members have been interacting with either the audience, their hosts, or other choirs that are there. The one thing the adults always say is, it's wonderful, these teenagers speak to us. We've never had that before. And I think that's something that comes through very much, is that they have the confidence to communicate with anybody, regardless of background, regardless of age. The curriculum itself is broad, but they also get the opportunity to study subjects in depth. So there's none of this constant moving every half an hour to a different subject. They spend a whole morning looking at their main topic, and that will last for 2 or 3 weeks. And they get a real sense of understanding of what it is that they're learning. And then they have the more practical subjects. Everybody does handwork, everybody does music. The whole system has a musical feel to it. There's a wonderful rhythm to the way that the school works, the way that the curriculum works. And that's something that the children can take with them throughout their lives. They will never, ever lose that. I think with my son, in terms of his own self-esteem and self-confidence, there's been no change at all. He's full on. He's never had any issues at all. But I think he has more opportunity to express himself and to be himself. The way he dresses, the way he plays with his friends, there's far more freedom, and I think that suits him. I also think the learning system suits him better. It's more based on observation. He gets to use his own ideas to make his own exploration. He's not told, this is an experiment we are going to do, this is what it will show, and this is how we're going to do it. It's kind of, well, here's some equipment. What do you think we're going to do? What do you think we're going to learn? And that, to me, is a wonderful way of learning, because it doesn't switch them off. They're using their own imaginations. They have to think for themselves. They have to reason for themselves. And that's a skill that I think a lot of children lose very quickly because they are spoon-fed information all the time. I've been asked by several people actually if it was the right decision sending my children here, and it is an unequivocal yes. It was a very difficult decision to make, taking them from a state system that I knew very well, I work in schools myself, to something that on the face of it was completely alien and very, very different. But it was the best decision I have ever made for both of them, for very different reasons. My daughter, because she couldn't cope with the stresses that the state system places on children, and I think at the age of 10, when you have a child who is suffering with stress, there is something radically wrong. With my son, because I think the style of learning, the style of teaching within the Steiner system suits him better than it would do in his later life in the state system. And if you want your child to remain a child for as long as possible, to make the absolute most of that childhood before it disappears, then the Steiner system is the one that you need to go for. It's a gentle approach, it's fun, it's all about exploring, it's about using your imagination, it's about listening, and it's about forming your own worldview rather than having a worldview imposed upon you. I work in a state school as a full-time job, and I work with about 10 other state schools. And one of the things that I have noticed over the years is the various reports that have come out from government agencies, research groups, etc., that are taking more and more from the Steiner system and feeding it into the state system. The EYFS Early Years Foundation Stage curriculum is based very, very heavily on the way that children are taught in the early years in the Steiner system. So it's the idea of children going out feeling real bricks rather than plastic ones, using real tools, going out and learning through play rather than this more formalised education. There's a big thing about forest schools and the number of state schools that are taking that on. But when you look at what forest schools are about, it's very much based on the ideals of the Steiner system, yet again. A more recent report has come out about the use of technology in the classroom, the interactive whiteboards, things like iPads and various other tablets and mobile devices. They are now coming to the conclusion that whilst it's not detrimental to learning, it isn't necessarily aiding learning. And one of the things that the Steiner system shies away from is use of technology in the classroom. Children are actually taught to write with a pen, which is something a lot of children find alien these days. They're so used to using a keyboard. They're taught to do proper research rather than just looking up things on the internet, to write their own material from their own heads rather than just copying and pasting. And we're seeing more and more of that. The idea that children don't start their formal education until much later is nothing new on the continent, but in this country for some reason we feel the need to start hothousing children from the age of about 3 and starting to teach them. Yet by the time they're 10, they're at no further point in their education than a child who's started to read and write at the age of 7. They're pretty much on a par. And certainly by the time you get through to the GCSEs and A-levels, there is no difference whatsoever in the attainment of either group of children.